The Unclaimed Thread, Chapter 1, The Stranger in the Mirror. Austin, Texas, vibrated with a unique blend of live music, academic fervor, and sun-baked charm. For Amber Wilson, a 58-year-old history professor at the University of Texas, life in Austin was comfortable, intellectually stimulating, and outwardly fulfilling. Yet, beneath the veneer of her well-ordered existence, a quiet, persistent hum of dissonance had always echoed. She felt, perpetually, like an anomaly, a stranger. Her family, her mother Marilyn, her father David, and her older brother Tom, were all quintessentially Texan, practical, grounded, with a love for outdoor pursuits and a straightforward, no-nonsense approach to life. Amber, however, was drawn to the intricacies of ancient civilizations, the philosophical debates of bygone eras, and the ethereal beauty of art. Her interests, her talents, even her physical appearance, a slender build, striking green eyes, and fiery auburn hair that seemed to absorb the light, were starkly different from her family's more robust, blue-eyed, fair-haired lineage. Her mother, Marilyn, in particular, had always maintained an emotional distance, a coolness that Amber had long attributed to personality, but which felt like a subtle, unspoken barrier. "You're just different, Amber," her mother would often remark, a comment that carried a subtle undertone of bewilderment, perhaps even disappointment. Amber had grown accustomed to the feeling of being an outsider, a curious historical artifact in her own home. One sweltering summer afternoon, as Austin baked under the relentless Texas sun, Amber embarked on the bittersweet task of clearing out the attic of her deceased Aunt Carol. Carol had been a pack rat, a keeper of family lore, and her attic was a treasure trove of forgotten trinkets and dusty documents. As Amber meticulously sorted through yellowed newspapers and brittle photographs, a particular clipping caught her eye. It was old, brittle, and partially torn, dating back to 1966, the year of her birth. The headline was jarring, a bold, unsettling declaration: "Baby swap suspected at local hospital." The article was fragmented, incomplete, but it hinted at a scandal, a chaotic day at the Austin General Hospital, where two baby girls born on the same day were potentially switched. Two families were mentioned, though only one name was clearly visible through the faded print: the Wilsons. A jolt, cold and undeniable, shot through Amber. The Wilsons, her family, her world, once merely humming with dissonance, now shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. The inexplicable feeling of being an outsider, her physical differences, her mother's emotional distance. It all coalesced into a terrifying, undeniable possibility. Could it be? Could she have been one of those babies? Could she have lived her entire life in a family that wasn't hers? The implications were staggering, monumental, capable of rewriting the entire narrative of her existence. The forgotten newspaper clipping was no longer just a historical artifact. It was a bomb, ticking silently in her hands. Chapter 2. The Unspoken Wall. The newspaper clipping felt scorching in Amber's trembling hands, despite its age. The fragmented article, the barely visible names, the chilling implication. It explained everything. Every lingering doubt, every sense of disconnect, every whisper of different. Her first instinct was to confront her mother. That evening, after a strained dinner, Amber approached Marilyn, the crumpled article clutched in her hand. "Mom," she began, her voice tentative, "I found this in Aunt Carol's attic. It's from 1966, about a baby swap at Austin General. It mentions the Wilsons." Marilyn's face, usually composed, stiffened. A glacial silence descended, thick and suffocating. Her eyes, usually cool, suddenly burned with an almost panicked intensity. "That's ridiculous, Amber," she snapped, her voice sharp, unusually harsh. Aunt Carol kept all sorts of nonsense. "It's an old rumor, nothing more. You were born at Austin General. You are our daughter. Don't you dare go digging into this past, Amber. It's irrelevant." Her mother's reaction was not just denial. It was a visceral, aggressive rejection. The intensity of her fear, the desperate urgency in her voice, only solidified Amber's terrifying suspicion. David, her father, usually the more gentle and approachable parent, remained silent, his gaze fixed on his hands, a shadow of distress flickering in his eyes. His silence was as telling as Marilyn's fury. The wall between Amber and her mother, always present, now felt impenetrable, fortified by decades of unspoken secrets. But Amber was a historian, a seeker of truth, and this mystery was no longer abstract. It was intensely, profoundly personal. She couldn't unsee what she had seen. She couldn't unfeel what she felt. She confided in her best friend, Sarah Morgan, a retired librarian and an avid amateur genealogist who possessed a keen eye for detail and an almost obsessive love for tracing family histories. Sarah, initially skeptical, grew wide-eyed as Amber recounted the discovery and her mother's reaction. "Amber," Sarah said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation, This is monumental. If it's true, it explains so much." Together, they began to research. Their first step was the Austin General Hospital. The hospital itself had long been demolished, replaced by a modern medical complex. But hospital records, especially those from sensitive incidents, sometimes found their way into city or state archives. Amber, using her academic credentials, gained access to obscure historical registries. They pieced together fragments of information. The year 1966 had indeed been chaotic at Austin General. A sudden, unexpected winter storm had hit central Texas, causing widespread power outages and an unprecedented surge in deliveries. The staff had been overwhelmed, resources stretched thin. It was a perfect storm for human error. They found a partial list of births from that day. 2 girls were born within hours of each other, besides Amber. One to a family named Jensen, and another to a family named Patterson. The Wilsons were also on the list. The fragmented newspaper clipping had indeed mentioned Wilsons and another family, now believed to be the Pattersons. The Jensens were quickly ruled out, as their baby had been a boy. The focus narrowed to the Patterson family. Amber and Sarah tracked down an elderly former nurse, Dr. Emily Cohen, who had worked at Austin General in 1966 and was now living in a quiet retirement community north of Austin. She was frail, her memory sometimes hazy, but the mention of the baby mix-up of 66 brought a flicker of recognition to her eyes. "Oh." That day, Dr. Cohen sighed, a faraway look in her eyes. It was pure pandemonium. The lights went out, the generator sputtered, newborns everywhere. And Mrs. Wilson, she was so agitated, insisted her baby had to be correctly identified. She was very particular about the blanket. She raised a fuss. I always felt something wasn't right, but we were so overworked. The doctor just wanted to quiet her. Dr. Cohen's words were a chilling confirmation. Marilyn's agitation, her insistence on identification. It wasn't just a nervous mother. It was a mother who perhaps knew something was amiss. The puzzle pieces, once scattered, were now beginning to interlock, forming a picture that was both horrifying and profoundly liberating. The next step was the most crucial: and the most terrifying: undeniable scientific proof. Chapter 3: The Unraveling Threads. The chilling confirmation from Dr. Cohen, coupled with her mother's aggressive denial, galvanized Amber. She had to know, definitively. Scientific proof was the only way to pierce through decades of silence and uncertainty. She carefully, discreetly collected DNA samples, her own, and with feigned casualness, samples from Marilyn and David, ostensibly for a family health history project she was working on for her university. She sent them to a reputable genetic testing lab, specifically requesting a parentage test. The wait was agonizing, each day a slow torture of anticipation and dread. When the results finally arrived, the clinical language of the report couldn't mask the monumental truth it unveiled. Under parentage probability, the numbers were stark. 0% probability of Amber Wilson being the biological offspring of Marilyn Wilson and David Wilson. The ground beneath Amber's feet seemed to vanish. 0. Not a shred of biological connection. The feeling of being different, of being an outsider, was no longer a vague intuition. It was a scientific fact. She was not a Wilson. Her entire life, her entire identity, had been built on a foundation of unspoken deception. The revelation was both devastating and liberating. The tears that fell were not just of sorrow, but of an overwhelming, profound understanding. Armed with this undeniable proof, Amber and Sarah intensified their search for the Patterson family. The hospital records, though sparse, indicated that the Pattersons were originally from California, having been in Austin temporarily for work or family reasons. This explained why they hadn't been easily traceable in Texas. Sarah, with her extensive genealogical tools, began cross-referencing names, birth dates, and family histories. She found a Lydia Patterson, born on the same day as Amber in 1966, whose family had indeed relocated to California shortly after her birth. Lydia's online profile, a casual social media presence, revealed a woman who, strikingly, bore a strong resemblance to Marilyn and David Wilson. The same robust build, the same blue eyes, the same fair hair. All the physical traits Amber had always lacked. It was a mirror image of the family she had grown up in, but with Lydia as the biological daughter. The realization was a profound punch to the gut. The girl who was supposed to be a Wilson, the true biological daughter of Marilyn and David, had been raised by the Pattersons. And the girl who was supposed to be a Patterson, a biological child of Alex and Claire Patterson, had been raised by the Wilsons. Amber, her hands shaking, sent a cautious, carefully worded email to Lydia Patterson. She introduced herself as a historian, explaining her research into old hospital records and a peculiar family mystery. She mentioned the Austin General Hospital, the year 1966, and the baby swap rumors. She didn't reveal the DNA results immediately. Sensing the need for a delicate approach, Lydia's reply came quickly, filled with polite curiosity. She acknowledged her birth date and place, and the fact that her parents had moved to California shortly after. She admitted that she, too, had always felt a subtle sense of being different from her Patterson family, though she loved them dearly. She had always wondered about her true ancestry, a quiet, unspoken curiosity. This common thread, this shared sense of being an unclaimed thread, instantly forged a connection. Amber, taking a deep breath, revealed the purpose of her email, the DNA results, and the overwhelming evidence suggesting a swap. Lydia was stunned, a mixture of disbelief and a dawning understanding in her voice, during their first phone call. "It explains so much," Lydia whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I always wondered why I was so different, why I felt like an outsider." Lydia, after speaking with her own parents, who were initially shocked but strangely receptive to the possibility, agreed to a DNA test. The results confirmed it. Lydia Patterson was the biological daughter of Marilyn and David Wilson, and Amber Wilson was the biological daughter of Alex and Claire Patterson. The truth, painstakingly unraveled, stood stark and undeniable. Amber was a Patterson. Lydia was a Wilson. Two lives, two families, irrevocably intertwined by a single, chaotic, fateful day in 1966. The world for both women had just been profoundly, irrevocably rewritten. Chapter 4: The Shattered Silence. The DNA results, irrefutable and devastating, confirmed the unfathomable truth. Amber was a Patterson, not a Wilson. Lydia was a Wilson, not a Patterson. Two families had unknowingly raised each other's children for 58 years. The revelation, though anticipated, struck Amber with a fresh wave of grief. Not just for herself, but for all involved. Her first and most difficult step was to confront Marilyn and David Wilson. She chose a quiet afternoon, inviting them to her home, away from distractions. She laid out the DNA reports, the newspaper clippings, Dr. Cohen's testimony, and the full narrative of her investigation. Marilyn's face, usually so composed, crumpled. The mask of denial she had worn for nearly 6 decades finally shattered. Tears streamed down her face, tears of anguish, of shame, of a profound, agonizing regret. I knew," she choked out, her voice raw with emotion. "I always knew, or I suspected. The moment I saw you, after the power went out, your tiny identification band was gone. And you just didn't look like us. The nurse said it was the trauma, the stress. But I knew. I saw the other baby. She looked so much like David. I couldn't lose you, Amber. I loved you. You were mine. I was so scared, so ashamed. I just wanted a baby so badly. I convinced myself it wasn't true. I convinced David. David, silent until then, nodded, his face etched with pain. She was so distraught, he whispered. She convinced me we could never speak of it, that it was a mistake. We loved you so much, Amber. We couldn't face the truth, the fear of losing you, the scandal. Their confession, long overdue, was a torrent of buried emotions, fear, love, regret, and a deeply misguided attempt at self-preservation. Amber listened, her own heart aching. She saw their pain, understood their flawed human motivations, but the deception, the years of silent lies, was a bitter pill to swallow. Forgiveness would be a long, arduous journey if it came at all. Then came the meeting with her true biological parents, Alex and Claire Patterson. Lydia had prepared them, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of meeting the daughter they had been told died shortly after birth. Amber flew to California, accompanied by Sarah, who offered silent support. The Pattersons, a warm, open couple, welcomed her with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. "Our little girl," Claire whispered, pulling Amber into a tight embrace. "We thought you were gone. All these years, we mourned you." Alex, his voice thick with emotion, explained their story. They had been told their baby, a girl, had suffered complications during birth and died shortly after. They had been devastated, moving back to California to escape the pain of Austin. They had adopted Lydia shortly after, loving her as their own, never suspecting the horrific lie they had been told. The Pattersons mourned the lost decades, the missed milestones, the years of their daughter's life they had never known. But their joy at finding Amber, at discovering she was alive and thriving, was immense, a profound, unburdened happiness that shone through their tears. For Amber, meeting her true family was like finding a missing piece of her soul. She saw herself in Claire's kind eyes, in Alex's intellectual curiosity. She understood why she felt different in the Wilson family. She was home, not just physically, but spiritually. The next challenge was the relationship between Lydia and Amber. They were, in effect, sisters. Bound by an extraordinary twist of fate, they spoke for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their mutual sense of being outsiders in their respective families, their shared love for learning. A profound, immediate sisterly bond began to form, a connection neither had ever anticipated. The two families, the Wilsons and the Pattersons, now faced the daunting task of navigating this new, complex reality. The Wilsons grappled with the pain of their deception, the potential loss of Amber, and the shocking discovery of their biological daughter, Lydia. The Pattersons, having endured decades of false grief, now had to integrate Amber into their lives, while acknowledging Lydia as their beloved adopted daughter. It was a messy, painful, but ultimately necessary unraveling. The unclaimed thread had finally found its true weave. Chapter 5: The Tangle of Forgiveness. The revelation of the baby swap sent shockwaves through both families, leaving a complex tangle of emotions: grief for lost years, relief at truth, and the agonizing question of forgiveness. For Amber, the path to healing was particularly arduous. She loved the Wilsons, the parents who had raised her, despite their deception. They were her history, her foundation. But the betrayal cut deep. Marilyn, overwhelmed by guilt, entered therapy, finally confronting the decades of fear and shame that had driven her to silence. David, too, sought counsel, grappling with his complicity. Their honesty, though painfully late, was a step towards possible reconciliation. Amber visited them often, but the conversations were guarded, tentative. She could acknowledge their pain, but she could not yet grant full forgiveness for the lie that had shaped her entire life. It was a wound that needed time, much time, to scab over. The Pattersons, however, embraced Amber with open arms and unburdened joy. Claire, Amber's biological mother, reveled in their shared love for art, for history, for quiet contemplation. Alex, her biological father, found immense pride in Amber's academic achievements. Seeing echoes of his own intellectual pursuits, they filled the void Amber had always felt, a sense of belonging that resonated deep within her soul. They mourned the lost years, but celebrated every new discovery, every shared moment. Lydia and Amber's bond deepened, a unique sisterhood born of a shared, unimaginable fate. They laughed, cried, and processed the emotional complexities of their intertwined lives. Lydia, always feeling like the creative dreamer in her pragmatic Wilson family, found an immediate understanding with Amber. They shared stories, celebrated milestones, and built a friendship that transcended conventional family ties. Lydia, too, began building a new, tentative relationship with her biological parents, Marilyn and David, a slow dance of discovery and acceptance. The medical community, especially the remnants of Austin General Hospital, also felt the reverberations of Amber's discovery. Her case, once a whispered rumor, became a historical event. Professor Arthur Finch, an expert in medical history, helped Amber document the case, highlighting the devastating impact of such errors and the importance of ethical practices and transparency in healthcare. The story became a cautionary tale, a powerful lesson taught in medical schools about the profound human cost of medical errors and the critical need for accurate identification. Amber, as a historian, immersed herself in documenting the entire narrative, not just for her family, but for the wider public. She started a research project, collecting similar stories of identity confusion and family separation, seeking to shed light on these often hidden tragedies. She presented her findings at academic conferences, her personal story adding a powerful emotional dimension to her scholarly work. The unclaimed thread of her life was no longer lost. It had found its intricate place in a larger, complex tapestry. She recognized that family was not simply defined by blood, but by love, by shared history, and by the enduring bonds forged through truth and vulnerability. Chapter 6: The Weave of New Beginnings. The years following the truth's unveiling brought a new, profound landscape to Amber's life. The initial shock subsided, replaced by a nuanced understanding of her dual existence. She was Amber Wilson, the accomplished professor who had spent a lifetime building a career in Austin. But she was also Amber Patterson, the biological daughter of Alex and Claire, the sister to Lydia. Connected to a lineage she was only just beginning to truly know. Her relationship with Marilyn and David Wilson remained complex. The raw anger had softened into a melancholic acceptance. They were, and always would be, the parents who raised her, who taught her to read, who celebrated her triumphs. They had made a terrible, selfish mistake, but they had also loved her fiercely in their own way. Forgiveness was a process, not an event, and Amber was slowly, tentatively, moving towards it, understanding that forgiving them was also a way of liberating herself. She visited them, shared quiet meals, and acknowledged the shared history that bound them. The bond with the Pattersons blossomed into a vibrant, loving connection. She spent holidays with them in California, soaking in their warmth, their shared intellectual curiosity, their easy laughter. Claire, her biological mother, became a confidant, a mirror reflection of her own spirit. Alex, her biological father, became a source of quiet wisdom and shared passion for historical inquiry. Lydia and Amber embraced their unique sisterhood. They were more than just siblings. They were parallel lives unexpectedly intertwined. They marveled at their shared traits, their similar quirks, and the distinct echoes of their biological families that manifested within them. They often spoke of the what-ifs, the lives they might have lived, but always returned to the profound gratitude for the unexpected gift of finding each other. Lydia, in turn, began forging a tentative relationship with her biological parents, Marilyn and David. A slow, gentle process of understanding. Amber found a new dimension in her academic work. She developed a popular university course titled Echoes of Identity, Family Secrets and Historical Truth, where she explored historical instances of hidden identities, family lineage disruptions, and the profound impact of secrets across generations. Her personal story, though never explicitly shared in class, imbued her lectures with a palpable authenticity and empathy. She also collaborated with Sarah Morgan on a book project, a historical account of baby swaps and identity confusion in the 20th century. Using her own story as a central case study, meticulously researched and sensitively told. The book aimed to shed light on these deeply personal tragedies, advocating for greater transparency and compassion within medical and legal systems. The Wilsons and Pattersons, once two disparate families, found themselves slowly, cautiously, forming a new expanded familial network. Holidays became complex affairs with careful navigation of shared spaces and unspoken histories, and the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. Chapter 7: The Unbroken Pattern. The final chapter of Amber's story was not one of simple resolution, but of profound integration. The threads of her life, once tangled and seemingly misplaced, had finally been woven into a rich, intricate tapestry. She was no longer the stranger in the mirror. She was a woman who understood her origins, her heritage, and the complex, beautiful truth of who she was. Her life in Austin continued, enriched by the new connections she had forged. Her work as a historian took on deeper meaning as she continued to explore the hidden narratives of the past, now with an intimate understanding of their profound impact on the present. She became a mentor to students grappling with their own senses of identity, offering guidance born of her unique journey. The quiet, enduring love she had for Marilyn and David Wilson, her adoptive parents, was tempered by the knowledge of their deception, yet also deepened by her understanding of their human frailties. They remained a part of her life, a complicated but undeniable thread in her personal history. Their relationship, while never fully pristine, found a fragile, honest peace built on the hard-won foundation of truth. With Alex and Claire Patterson, her biological parents, Amber built a relationship of pure, unadulterated joy and acceptance. They were her mirror, her intellectual kindred spirits, her deep emotional anchors. They celebrated each other, mourned the lost time, and cherished every moment of their newfound connection. Their love was a testament to the enduring power of blood ties. Even those discovered decades later, Lydia became more than a sister. She was a soulmate, a companion on an extraordinary journey. Their shared laughter, their tears, their quiet understanding forged an unbreakable bond. They were living proof that life could throw the most unexpected curveballs, yet still lead to profound connections and unexpected blessings. Amber often reflected on the profound irony of her life. A historian by profession, she had lived a personal history that was, for decades, deliberately obscured. Her life was a testament to the fact that the past, no matter how carefully hidden, always finds a way to surface. And when it does, it has the power to shatter, to heal, and ultimately to redefine who we are. The unclaimed thread was now a vibrant, integral part of a much larger, more colorful pattern. Amber Wilson, the woman who had spent a lifetime feeling like an outsider, had finally found her place, not in one family, but in the embrace of a sprawling, beautiful, and complex tapestry of human connection, woven from truth, love, and the enduring echoes of a past finally understood. Her story became a beacon of hope for anyone who felt disconnected, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest discoveries about ourselves lie hidden in the forgotten whispers of history.